Hey, what's up, Flutter friends? I'm going through this block counter tutorial and thought, why not just live code and see what happens. So if you're doing this and need somebody to do it with, I'm here to do it with you. So let's do it. Okay, I'm here at this this link. I guess I'll share that in the notes. But anyways, it's the Flutter block counter tutorial. You can Google that too. All right, I'm using Android Studio, so let's get that open. In a sec, we'll just go bit by bit. So in the following tutorial, we're going to build a counter in Flutter using the block library. Okay, the reason I'm doing this for myself is I want to learn to use block in an app I'm coding. So yeah, just going to go through the basic stuff. All right, so there's some key topics that they're talking about here. Observe state changes with block observer. Okay, so this to me is kind of like a listener. So it's going to be actively hooked into something to listen for state changes. And I think in Flutter we use change notifier for that, or notify listeners or something like that. So block observer is going to be some kind of class, I would imagine, that we either inherit from or we implement or something, right? But I've never seen it, so I don't know. Block provider. This is a Flutter widget which provides a block to its children. This, I think, like coming from the provider world, this sounds kind of like change notifier provider or something like that. But it's just the widget that we like insert into our main code. Okay, block builder, a Flutter widget that handles building the widget in response to new states. Okay, yeah. All right, and then using qubit instead of block, what's the difference? I've heard about these two differences, like one's a stream and one's not a stream. For simple state management. Finally, adding events with context.read. Okay, so it sounds like you can use qubit or block. They're kind of the same thing for all intents and purposes, but you can get away with qubit when it's easier and not have to mess with block, which can be more complex, but generally they follow the same architecture. And we're going to have these three classes, a block observer, block provider, block builder, and we will see how they all fit into an application. Okay, let's go into the setup. We'll start by creating a brand new Flutter project, Flutter create Flutter counter. I'm going to just use Android Studio and open a new Flutter project. Come on, dude. Why? There we go. Okay. I don't know why I was checked earlier. All right, I'm going to create a Flutter application. Hit next. Instead of Flutter counter here, I'm just going to call this block counter. Okay. Yep, I think all this stuff is just. I'm actually going to put this. Get rid of that query parameter, and just for the description put in a link to the site where I'm doing this from. Yeah. Okay, that looks fine. Include Kotlin and Swift, why not? And we'll finish. Okay, so we're going to create that. Something I see in yeah, new window, please. Okay. Let's move this here to the corner, close that tip, and get this lined up so we can just record the screen. One of my pet peeves is the phrase "go ahead," because usually when you say go ahead, whether it's in documentation or you're giving a speech or something, you can just omit go ahead. So this should say maybe something like, we can then replace the contents of pubspec.yaml. A lot of times people use go ahead as this sort of just like, it's kind of like the word sort of or kind of. It's just this verbal crutch. It's a bit of a filler. Anyways, we can then go ahead and replace the contents, or just replace the contents of pubspec.yaml with the following. We can either copy to clipboard or see what is new with all of this as soon as Android Studio decides to load. So. Did it create block counter? It did. New window. Okay, I think we are further along now. All right. Shift, and don't know what just happened. It's the end of a long day. My wife and I groomed one of our doodles, and that takes forever. And I'm trying to be as, just patient as I can be with Android Studio right now. But it is testing my patience a little bit. Okay. It's easier to maybe manage if there's just one instance of Android Studio open. All right, now we're going to be able to open our pubspec.yaml. So if you ever wonder why nobody gets anything done in their spare time on evenings and weekends, they have a full-time job, so they can't pursue their dreams, or they have dogs to groom during the day, or Android Studio hangs. There's always reasons. Life's slowing you down, and you got to be consistent. Sometimes you just got to stick your chin into the wind. Keep going. Okay. Yeah. Version, publish, SDK, I think that's all fine. It looks like we're depending on Flutter. What I'm going to do is instead of just copying the stuff directly, I kind of want to do this. Okay, this is a Flutter project, so I think I should have Flutter Bloc. I don't know if Flutter Bloc depends on Bloc itself. It says it does, so I don't know why we would need to have both of those listed as a dependency in our pubspec. Let me look at the installing tab here. I like to do this, Flutter pub add Flutter Bloc. Let's do that. That way I get the latest and greatest, and I'll just let this thing do it for me. Oh, because I highlighted that line, it copied nothing. Okay, there we go. Cool. All right, so what that does is it should update this here. Okay, going back to the tutorial, they probably update this tutorial as their versions update, but it probably lags behind a little bit. Anyways, Flutter Bloc is on 7.3.1 at this point, which is just .1 higher on the minor version there, or the patch or whatever. You'll notice I don't have Bloc here. There are some dev dependencies. They have Flutter test. What do we have? So we have Flutter test. They have something. They're not using Flutter lengths apparently, but they are saying use material design true. We have that. So they just have Bloc test and mocktail. I want to see if I say pub get. Okay, what I'm thinking is if I check out or look at pubspec.lock, I'm thinking, what is going to be in this file? Will I already have Bloc itself? I will. And what version is it on? 7.2.1. So it's also one more. See, so I don't actually have to list Bloc purposefully here. Okay, so I'm not going to. Maybe I have to? I don't know. I don't think I have to though. We'll see. Let's see if we have Bloc test. We don't have Bloc test. Okay. Do we have mocktail? We don't have mocktail. Do we have integration test? Okay. So what I'm going to do is go look at Bloc test. Okay. And it looks like it depends on mocktail. So let's install this. This is Dart pub add with Flutter pub add. Okay, so you can use it with either. Let's do that. It's going to add it to my pub spec. Hopefully in the dev dependencies like it is here, right? No, look, it put it up there. Well, that's interesting. I don't think it should matter though, for our purposes. If I wanted it to only be available in a development environment, I think I would want to put it here. But like we're not pushing this to production right now, so I think it's fine to just have it up here. It should have mocktail, and I don't know about integration test. Let's see. Okay, so now we have mocktail 020. Do we have integration test? No. So let's add that. Unidentified. Deprecated. This package has been moved to the Flutter SDK. Starting with Flutter 2.0, it should be included as integration test, SDK Flutter. Why? So my question then is, the package has been deprecated, so I shouldn't have to do a Flutter pub add or something like that, right? It should be included as this. It's been moved to the Flutter SDK. Does this mean that we should include it like this, or that it should already be there because it should be there like starting with Flutter 2.0? It's not there, so let's add it, I guess. Okie dokie. Okay, where did it add it? Right there? Okay. anyways, yeah, so we have integration test now, and it is not given a spec here. Okay, pub-get. Good. Okay, so we're basically up to date. We're using Dart, I think that's a little bit older, Dart 2.12. It should be okay. Okay, then install all of our dependencies, Flutter packages git, or just pub-get right there. Okay, still running. Let's have a look at our project structure. Okay, looks like we have a lib folder. Okay, like that. We have a main.dart. We don't have a counter. We don't have any of this stuff in lib yet. I don't think we should have that though. Okay. So maybe that's the, okay. This is not our current project structure. This is the project structure that we are aiming for, that we will hopefully have. Okay. All we have right now that matches this is a lib directory, a main.dart. Okay, lib directory, main.dart, pub/spec YAML, and lock. Eventually we'll have a counter observer. We'll have a counter folder. Okay, so that's like a the counter feature itself. This counter.dart, I believe, is going to be what they call like a borrowed file, where its sole purpose is to export all of this junk. We'll also have app.dart, so we're going to take some of the code, I think, out of main.dart and put it up there. All right, so this is the Very Good Ventures and perhaps the Bloc architecture of organizing your code. Cool. Okay, so that's done. Let's keep going. The application uses a feature-driven directory structure, okay? And that's what you see here with this counter. This is the counter feature. It's feature-driven directory structure. So instead of having like a folder called views or controller, you just have the name of the feature. Okay, this project structure enables us to scale the project by having self-contained features. In this example, we will only have a single feature, the counter itself, but in more complex applications, we can have hundreds of different features. So in my mind, I think maybe you would have like a folder called features, and then you would nest all those in there. Otherwise, you would just have hundreds of folders whenever you open lib. Maybe that's okay. Maybe you're okay with that. Doesn't really make a technical difference. It's just a human difference. How does it affect you, the programmer? Okay, so the setup took a little bit of time, yeah? Some of it's my fault with Android Studio. Some of it is just figuring out like how these things are related and what we really need to include, and being okay with them not being a dev dependency. All right, let's check out this block observer. I remember seeing this up here. It said observe state changes with block observer. And it looks like we're going to create this thing called counter observer. So the first thing we're going to take a look at, so this is another example of like filler language that you can take out. The first thing we're going to look at is how to create a block observer, which will help us observe all state changes in the application. All right, so we're creating a Dart file in the lib directory called counterobserver.dart. Okay, right-click, new Dart file, counter observer, enter. There it is, counterobserver.dart. I'm now going to copy these contents over here. I don't know what this @template thing does. It's for documentation, I think. I don't know that we actually need that. So this is kind of just getting in my way. Okay, I'm going to delete that. However, we are importing Bloc, which was included as part of the Flutter Bloc library or package. So it looks like counter observer extends Bloc observer. The first thing to note is extends is just regular class inheritance. So counter observer is a child of the parent class Bloc observer. Yeah, there's no special keyword to indicate an observer type of class. But it looks like onChange is defined in Bloc observer, and we are overriding it here in the child class. It looks like it takes a block base and a change. We're going to call the superclass do whatever's in Bloc observer first, and then print the Bloc runtime and the change that we pass in. Okay. So it says in this case we're only overriding onChange to see all state changes that occur. So maybe whenever our counter changes, this is the code that's going to run. Okay, so somehow we need to call our counter observer, like get an instance of that and then call onChange. Like that's somehow going to be triggered when our counter number actually changes. So in my mind, it's almost like a lifecycle event, like after change kind of, or yeah, after change would make the most sense to me. OnChange works the same way for both Bloc and Qubit. Okay, so this is something I had heard about before, that they're kind of interchangeable. So just go with it for now. All right, so now it says next let's replace the contents of main.dart. So let's open main.dart. Okay, so we've got material. We're going to need to import Bloc. Ooh, yeah. So down here it says create libapp.dart and then import it. So we're importing it before we move stuff out. Let's just go ahead and copy this to the clipboard and paste it here. Okay, so it looks like, yeah, we're going to need app.dart. So it's a Dart file, app, there it is. Okay, so now it should be okay because it recognizes there's a file. We just created counter observer, and now we have a main program. We are setting our Bloc observer to be the counter observer. Okay, so this is above in the widget tree, setting this counter observer so that we can affect the child components. It looks like we have run app. Okay, this is a feature in Dart, or sorry, in Flutter. Yeah. Okay, and now we need to have a counter app class. We have a counter observer, but we need a counter app, and I believe that'll probably go in app.dart. So we need a counter app. Okay, it says we're initializing the counter observer we just created, which is this line, and calling run app with the counter app widget, which we'll look at next. Okay, cool. I think we're right on track. So we have app.dart. Counter app will be a material app and is specifying home as counter page. All right, so this is app.dart. Right, this is a feature-driven architecture. So we need to create a feature folder, also known as, I guess, a package. Okay. I know to name it counter because I'm importing this thing here, and we're going to have a folder, a file, Dart file called counter.dart, and that's specifically right here, and its sole purpose is to export so that we can import it. Okay. Alright, macro counter app. I'm not familiar with those documentation comments. Okay, we've got ourselves a counter app. It extends material app. We have a const constructor, and then this looks like just some common stuff. We're going to need a counter page. I bet that's going to go somewhere in this folder. Let's read what the authors say though about this. Counter app will be a material app is specifying the home as counter page. Okay, so looks like material app has a home key it can take, and we want to give it that home value. Okay, it says note, we are extending material app because counter app is a material app. Oftentimes this extends keyword lets you know what something is, how it is classified. That's really what that class means there, is classification. Okay, in most cases we're going to be creating a stateless widget or stateful widget. So in most cases that's what we're going to make. Instances and composing widgets in build, but in this case there are no widgets to compose, so it's simpler just to extend material app. Okay, interesting. Just note, in the real world you probably won't do this, is what it sounds like. Let's look at the counter page next. So we have lib counter. We currently have that. Now we need a new folder called view. Kind of bugs me that it's not views. Just view, and it needs to go inside of counter. Yes, refactor. Is it? It's not inside there. Do refactor. There you go. Okay, now we need a counter page.dart. So let's create a new Dart file. Counter page.dart. Okay, so now I've done that. I'm going to close some of these. Okay, we haven't defined counter page. We just have the file. Counter page widget is responsible for creating a counter qubit, which we will look at next, and providing it to the counter view. Okay, so this is already a lot more boilerplate than what I'm used to, but I like the fact that the structure or the architecture, the files and folders, is opinionated like this. So as long as I just learn that system, it's just I can just do whatever the opinion is, and that way it's one less thing for me to think about, even though it's heavier on the implementation. Counter page. Okay. It's important to separate or decouple the creation of a qubit from the consumption of a qubit in order to have code that is much more testable and reusable. Okay, so again, I'm getting rid of these comments just for my own sanity. Counterview.dart. Where is that going to go? Probably here. We have counterpage.dart. We need to import counter view Dart file. Okay. Now that we have that file there, that error goes away. Block provider. Okay, that is part of Flutter Bloc. We've imported Flutter Bloc. Why? What is this error message we're getting? Yeah, I don't. It's red for some reason though. Okay, let's keep reading. Maybe it'll fix itself. Okay, counter qubit. Let's create lib counter qubit. Lib counter. Okay, so we have another package here called qubit, and it's going to have a file in it, a Dart file called counter qubit. Okay. Now it says the counter qubit class will expose two methods, increment and decrement. So it sounds like this qubit, or this block thing, that it is what houses the logic. Okay, block stands for business logic component. This sounds like the business logic component to me. This sounds like the block or the qubit, which is why it's called counter qubit or counter block. Okay, the type of the state is managing. It's just an int. The initial state is 0. Let's copy this and paste it there. Add 1 to the current state. Okay, subtract 1 from the current state. I am fine with all of that. Okay, counter qubit extends qubit. This is a special kind of qubit, it looks like, that takes an integer. Okay, interesting. So the constructor for a qubit with this signature just takes a positional integer. Okay, cool. We've still got a few errors. Let's see if they clear up in a second. Use the VS Code extension or IntelliJ plugin to create new qubits automatically. What is this IntelliJ plugin? And this, folks, is why we go through tutorials. Bloc. Okay. Editor. Tools. I just forget what this is, like the plugins or whatever. Marketplace. Bloc. That looks like it, doesn't it? Restart IDE? Sure, why not? Why not? So me personally, the reason I use Android Studio is because I used IntelliJ at my job at Bank of America, and I use RubyMine in my regular 8 to 5 job today. So I'm just comfortable with the IDE, and as you get older, you become more resistant to change. So that's why. All right, so we have that. Looks like we can create block classes and qubit classes. That's cool. Awesome. Slows down IntelliJ. All right. Next, let's take a look at counter view, which will be responsible for consuming the state and interacting with the counter qubit. All right, where's the counter view? Counter view, this guy. Ah, there's nothing here yet. Okay, counter view. Rendering the current count, rendering the two floating action buttons to increment, decrement the counter. Okay, so there's a lot of code here. Okay. So we're importing this counter, which is exporting anything else that view needs access to. Okay, let's take a look. We've got material, we've got Flutter block, we've got the counter, this one here. This is ultimately going to be importing other things. Stateless widget, okay, so that's nice. Counter view, what's wrong with that? Add key to constructors? Yeah. All right, we're overriding the build method. This is a common theme in Flutter. Floating action button. Okay, yeah, on pressed. This is the logic. We have, where does the block come in? Context.read the counter qubit and then increment it. Read decrement. But nowhere in here did we, there we go. In the scaffold. Looks like we have a child block builder. Okay, counter qubit, int, builder context state, return text. So this is kind of like how we read the current state in. Is we have a block builder widget, takes a builder function with context and state, and then we just return the state. Okay. And then down here with these buttons, we just change the state. Okay, that makes sense to me. A block builder is used to wrap the text widget in order to update the text anytime the counter qubit state changes. Yep, that's what that is. Cool. In addition, context read counter qubit is used to look up the closest counter qubit instance. Okay, I guess there could be other instances or something. So I guess it's looking up the state from this counter qubit. Goes, you know, in the ancestor tree and looks. Huh. Yeah, these signatures, they're not the friendliest. But I guess they work, and that's how we do it in Dart. In addition, context read, yeah, look up, okay. Only the text widget is wrapped in a block builder because that is the only widget that needs to be rebuilt in response to the state changes in the counter qubit. Yeah, we don't need to rebuild any of like this children array. We don't need to rebuild the floating action button for adding if that was done, you know, like this. And you can see it too, right? Like this has a const key, this has a const icon. It has a const size box here. Like none of this is being rebuilt. Like there's a little animation when you press it, and I think you get that maybe for free from floating action button itself. But really, it's just the value in the text field, right? This first positional argument for text. That's exactly what we're updating. Avoid unnecessarily wrapping widgets that don't need to be rebuilt when a state changes. Sounds good. Okay, we're at the end of this thing. And it says barrel. I don't know why, what barrel means. Let's create lib counter counter.dart, lib counter counter.dart. This is our borrowed file, barrel file. Maybe that's what, okay. I was talking to somebody whose first language was not English, and we were talking about this file, and I thought they were saying borrowed file, but I think he was saying barrel file. I don't know why it's called a barrel file. All right, add counter.dart to export all the public-facing parts of the counter feature. Okay, so all this thing does is it just exports the qubit and the view. Here we have qubit, counter qubit dot dart, and here we have counter page. So we're not exporting the view, but the counter view, yeah, that was that. I can ignore that for now. I'm gonna say ignore that for now. Okay. That's actually being used in the counter page. So just by exporting the counter page, it's going to bring that along, I guess. because we've imported it and it compiles, right? Okay, so this is kind of interesting. The counter page has what looks like just like the structure, sort of the architecture, the boilerplate. We're returning a block provider. Counter qubit, child is counter view. Okay, because we're in counter page, this one here. So in counter view, renders, block builder. Did we use block builder just now? Yeah, so this is block provider, and this is what's used in the page. But in the actual UI and the view, we're using block builder. Okay, so block builder in the view, block provider in the page, and here's our qubit. Yeah, then we have this observer file, and that extends the block observer. So those are 3 block classes. Okay, so the end of the tutorial says, that's it. We've separated the presentation letter from the business logic layer. The counter view has no idea what happens when a user presses a button. Is that true? Counter view. It has no idea what happens. So it's saying, I think the counter view knows that it increments and decrements. Like, that's the point of these floating action buttons. This one is to increment and this one is to decrement. But it's just updating and it's just incrementing and decrementing this value from counter qubit. Okay, context.read counter qubit. It's incrementing and decrementing that. I guess by virtue of this method signature right here, it might quote unquote know that this is the state it's updating. But like from a programming standpoint, programmatically, it doesn't really know. All it knows about is the observer, I think, because that's no, sorry. Where was the increment and decrement? Okay, yeah, the counter qubit itself is where increment and decrement are defined. So in the view, that's what's happening there. Okay. It just notifies the counter qubit. Okay, so we have ourselves a view. I need to change my setting to when I open the new tab, it updates over here. I think I would like that. So the view notifies the counter qubit. Okay, this thing happens, it emits state, and then this other stuff is just set up to provide state to the counter view. So then we go back to the counter view, and this block builder is where we consume that state. Okay. Furthermore, the counter qubit has no idea what is happening with this state. It simply emits new states in response to the methods being called. So I like that it's decoupled. You just gotta learn where the things go. There's not a lot of moving pieces, but there's a lot of parts, period. Okay, we can run our app with Flutter Run and view it on our device or simulator. The full source, including the unit and widget test for the example, can be found here. All right, let's see if it builds. That'll be our final test. Got to wrap my mind around this feature-driven architecture. folder and file structure. I mean, should each feature only have one view? And that's why you have a view folder, but it has a page and a view. Like, what's the difference in a page and a view? Like, why are they named that way? Maybe there's my mouse is frozen. Okay. Observe state changes with block observer. Okay. I feel like I'm observing the changes with the qubit though. You know? No, that's not observing. That's, well, the reason I say that is because increment and decrement are defined here. So they kind of observe state changes because, yeah, but this is not really observing or consuming. So the block observer in my mind is what's consuming here. Now this block builder. So block observers in the, no, Jesus. Okay. Counter observer. Okay, block.observer, counter observer. Okay, so we're declaring like, hey, this is our observer. I guess that just has to be there, right? Observe state changes. But it seems like everything else is going on in this part of the app. I don't really even see how the other stuff knows about this. Like, why did we have to put this in there? Block provider. Okay, each Flutter widget provides a block to its children. Provides a block to its children. So this counter page, this is where the block provider is. And it kind of just wraps the view. Counter qubit. Yeah, there's a lot of extra code. Interesting. Okay, they provide the block to the children, which is this thing. And then the builder is where we actually finally consume the state. The Flutter widget that handles building the widget in response to new states. Okay, we have to actually click on this to see what the difference is. Hey, simulator's up. Will it run? Okay, man, that's interesting. This is called a barrel file. It's so interesting. I think there's more. I actually don't know how to get to that. Is this in the way? Why can't I open the menu? Oh, it's down here. Look at that. That is a weird place to have that button. Core concepts, architecture, naming conventions. Naming conventions are important. Let's check that out while this builds. Hamburger, go away. Okay. The following naming conventions are simply recommendations and are completely optional. Feel free to use whatever naming conventions you prefer. You may find some of the examples documentation. Do not follow the naming conventions mainly for simplicity, conciseness. These conventions are strongly recommended for large projects with multiple developers. I'm just going to stick to the convention, because if you come from a Rails world, convention over configuration. please. All right, event conventions. Events should be named in the past tense because events are things that have already occurred from the block's perspective. So what events do we have? I can't scroll with this wheel. Still can't scroll. Okay, the anatomy, block subject plus noun plus verb. Wow, okay. What is happening? Initial load events should follow the convention block subject plus started. Initial load events. Counter incremented, counter decremented. Did we use this? Past tense. So increment is nothing here that has any tense. On change. Goodness, goodness, goodness. Okay, so this whole like naming convention thing, we're not even using counter incremented or counter decremented. So I don't know what it's talking about. Event conventions. Like, what is the event? Where does the event live? Right? Is that here? Incremented, decremented? Block subject. That would be counter, right? Plus noun is optional, plus verb, which is why you have this example counter incremented. Initial load. I guess we don't have any events, but then they give us the example of the counter incremented or counter decremented, but we're not using this name anywhere here. Some of the examples do not follow the naming conventions for simplicity, conciseness. Counter incremented, counter increment? Yeah, I don't know. Nice. We have ourselves a counter app. Success. Oh man. Yeah, we'll have to look at this sort of thing. Okay. Okay, anyways, we managed to do the counter tutorial in Bloc. So well done, everybody. Again, main, this is our entry point. We created an observer, so it's like turning a light switch on, but we had to define this observer. We overrode the onChange. I don't know that we would have to actually have this. What if you said block.observer is just block observer? Do we even need this? Like, we're overriding onChange, calling super, and then printing. That's all it's doing, is providing a way to print the output. I think that's what that is. Okay, hot restart. Okay, it still works, right? That's cool. We're not printing anything, so we remove this. So in my mind, this main could just have block observer, right? In this case, we didn't even need our counter observer. Okay, we can delete this code, this file. Yep, do it. Okay. I'm going to do a hot restart. Okay, still works, but obviously I think we need this observer to be alive. We need a hot restart, and it should fill, and it doesn't. Okay, that's unexpected. So we didn't need the counter observer, this whole block observer thing. Then observe state changes with block observer. Like, what does it mean to observe state changes? Okay, I guess you really don't need to observe state changes. You don't at all. Now my main file doesn't even depend on Dart at all. We have a counter app, so if we go there, what are we doing? Nothing. We are just saying, hey, go to the counter page. That is our first route. Okay, that's our home page. We're returning a counter view that's wrapped with a block provider and a counter qubit, okay, and that's defined here. And that contains the logic where it says our initial state is 0. We either increase it or decrease it by 1. So that's fine. So in the view itself, we consume it with a block builder. There's our state. And this is how we change it. So you don't... It's interesting. I thought there was some sort of like bigger picture linking between these types of components, but there wasn't. It's just an extra optional thing you can do, is you can observe state changes with block observer. But block observer was not like the provider and builder and the whole qubit thing. It had no dependence on block observer at all. Okay. And then we added an event, context.read. Something interesting to note here is we didn't have a repository. Okay, this structure also uses a thing called a repository pattern. Maybe in the next few examples it will. Anyways, that is the counter. I think next time maybe we'll do a timer and an infinite list and so forth. I don't know why this is called a barrel file. maybe it's in one of the core concepts, architecture. Let me search for barrel. It's not there. Yeah, so we didn't have the repository. Business logic extends block or qubit. Okay, so this is our actual block. This is the business logic where we're doing something. Presentation layer. Blah blah blah. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to see it. All right, what's a barrel? What's a barrel file? Barrel export. So this is like a thing that people do. So I've been working professionally as a Rails developer for 4 years, and I've never heard of a barrel file. I guess we don't use them. But apparently this is a way to save yourself from having too many. Anyways, barrel files, interesting. It's a way to export all your stuff from one single place. Okay. Cool little idea. All right, that's it. I'll catch you next time.